This is Elizabeth Chu, the CEO of the South Carolina Historical Society. Welcome to From the Vault, the South Carolina Historical Society podcast, created and hosted by my colleague, Sydney Derrick, our librarian. Imagine spending all day long in a library reading someone else's diary. That is what historians and people who use archives do every day. From the Vault, we'll be telling stories of all South Carolinians from the perspective of the many fascinating items in our large and important archival collections.
Hello and welcome to From the Vault, the South Carolina Historical Society podcast. As you just heard from Elizabeth, I'm Sydney Derrick, librarian here at the Historical Society. Today's episode continues our Dubose and Dorothy Heyward month, discussing these two Charleston Renaissance writers. In today's episode, we're talking with Annette Guild, the Metadata Specialist here at the Society. She recently finished a project to digitize some of the papers of the Heywards, and those are now available on the Lowcountry Digital Library, as well as Digital Library of South Carolina and the Digital Public Library of America. But before we get into that, let's hear some announcements. Our Stories Around the State series continues with a speaking event in Bennettsville in June on art and the American Revolution. More events will be scheduled soon, so check out the Programs and Events tab on our website, schistory.org, to get dates and exact locations. And if you're in town between late June and July 4th, all kinds of events will be happening here in Charleston, including a special pop-up exhibit of documents related to the American Revolution at our museum in the Fireproof Building at 100 Meeting Street. Of course, check back at our website, schistory.org, or join our email list to stay updated on our latest events. We are excited to talk with Annette Guild today, who oversees our digitization projects. Raised in Anderson, she received her bachelor's degree in history and political science from Anderson University and her master's in public history from James Madison University. Before joining the South Carolina Historical Society staff, she was a graduate assistant for James Madison University's Histories Along the Blue Ridge project and worked with the Rockingham County Circuit Court and Clerk's Office to preserve and digitize their archival materials. Annette is very passionate about South Carolina history, and she loves working to make historical documents and resources more accessible to the public. Annette, thank you so much for joining us here on the podcast today, and we can jump right into the questions. So you spent several months digitizing parts of the Heyward papers that are here in our archives. Can you tell us a little bit about which sections your project focused on and why?
Yeah, absolutely. So for this digitization project, we chose to focus on materials pertaining to the novel Porgy and the play Porgy. So the story of Porgy is most commonly known through its opera iteration, Porgy and Bess. And while we hope to digitize some of the papers that we have that pertain to the opera, we thought it would be really interesting to digitize the materials that provide insight into the development of the original story. So some of the fragments that we have digitized include handwritten and typewritten manuscript fragments from the novel and the play, with edits that Dubose and Dorothy made, newspaper articles detailing the novel's reception, programs for the original performances of Porgy, royalty statements, and even notebooks that Dubose Heyward's mother kept, in which she recorded stories, poetry, and anecdotes about Gullah and African American culture in South Carolina. And this is where Dubose got the name Porgy for the lead character.
That's cool. So it's not just information pertaining to, the production of the stuff. It's really the whole background and the history of it.
Correct. Yeah. We thought that the notebooks that Dubose Heyward's mother kept were really interesting and provided some interesting background for the story. So that was something that we really wanted to digitize as well.
Yeah, that's really exciting. So something that we talk a lot about at work, but that others may not be aware of, is how labor intensive this process of digitization is.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about what that entails?
Yeah, so digitization is a much different process than what people think it is. Often when I tell people that my job is digitizing historical materials, they're just like, oh, so you do a lot of scanning of things. But digitization is much more than just scanning because I have to make sure that everything we scan is actually findable. So everything that we digitize at the Historical Society goes on the Lowcountry Digital Library, which is the digital library that is owned and operated by the College of Charleston. But if you go on the Lowcountry Digital Library, you can find items by either browsing the website or searching for them directly. And if you pull up an item on there, you'll see that it has a title, a creator, a date, a short description, and all this other information that tells you what the item is without actually having to read or look at the item. I'm the one who writes and records all of this information for those items, so researchers can find things and know what they're looking at. This information that I record is called metadata, but really the important thing is that in order to write good metadata, I have to read, analyze, and really understand every item that I work with, which takes a lot of time. It makes digitization a far more labor-intensive process than people often realize.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about that, so even if you were to scan something in and include the title of the piece, so for instance, Porgy.
Yeah.
Somebody might be able to search for it by typing in Porgy, since that is the title and you've added that bit of metadata in. But if you don't do the description or the subjects contained therein, they might not see the connection to the Gullah language or the Gullah people, or even Charleston or South Carolina, because those details wouldn't be added, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Metadata links, it not only describes objects, it links them together. So when people are doing research, so if someone was doing research on Gullah culture in South Carolina and had never heard of the work of Porgy, because Gullah is one of the things that I tagged in this project, that's going to come up when people are researching Gullah culture in South Carolina.
So yeah, definitely an important step in the process, and it's why we don't have everything in our archives digitized yet, because it takes a while.
It takes a long time. It takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of money.
Yes, exactly. That too. As the metadata specialist, you digitize and write metadata for papers from many different collections. So how do you make sure that the descriptions you write will help those doing research in the future find what they need?
Yes, that is a very good question. So when I'm digitizing materials and writing metadata, I really try to think like a researcher. People aren't usually searching for a single item. They're following themes, names, dates, or events. So I really focus on making those entry points as clear and as discoverable as possible. So I really focus on capturing key names, places, dates, and subjects that people might search for. Even if those details seem small, they can be the exact hook that leads a researcher to the material. But also at the same time, I try to write descriptions that are clear and readable, that aren't too short, but also not too long. So both academic researchers and general users can understand what they're looking at.
Yeah. And sometimes, we've talked about this before, sometimes that means that you have to research what was going on at the time so that you can provide context for maybe what they were talking about in this letter or in this journal entry or what have you, that might not be clear if you just read it outright.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that happened a lot with this particular digitization project because I was digitizing fragments from the original novel and play manuscripts, including scenes that got left out of the original novel. So that took some research to kind of provide some context for what I was reading and to kind of help me make sense of what I was looking at and what I should tag and how exactly I should describe this item for people wanting to look at it.
Absolutely. So you did look at quite a few items when you were working on this project. So what was your favorite item that you came across?
Ooh.
Or favorite few items. You can have more than one.
That's a hard one because I really loved working on this digitization project, and I loved reading about the story of Porgy and learning more about it. And I really find Dorothy Heyward to be very interesting, and the hand that she had in the story of Porgy. We have the handwritten and typewritten notes and manuscript fragments for the novel, which are really cool. And as I already mentioned, they even record some scenes that Dubose discarded while he was writing it. But I think my favorite items that I came across were actually the programs for the first performances of Porgy. So Porgy, of course, was originally a novel that was written by Dubose Heyward and published in 1925. In 1927, the story premiered as a play on Broadway, put on by a theatrical society called the Theater Guild. And it was a unusual production at the time because it featured almost an entirely African American cast at the insistence of Dubose and Dorothy Heyward. So in our collection, we have the original programs for the Theater Guild's production of Porgy that lists those Black actors and actresses that starred in that play. But I also found the programs to be really cool because they're these little windows into 1920s culture. So all throughout the programs are advertisements for 1920s like products and advertisements for businesses in New York City. So everything from like makeup to Lincoln Motor Cars. And some of the programs even had like little segments on 1920s like men and women's fashion. So I just found them very fun and very visually interesting to look through.
Yeah, that's cool. So was there something new that you learned about Dubose or Dorothy by taking such a close look at these papers?
I was familiar with the story of Porgy and Dubose Heyward as a Southern author. But in doing this digitization project, I really came to learn how much of a hand that Dorothy Heyward had in the development of the Porgy story. So Harlan Green does an excellent job of detailing this in his most recent book, Porgy's Ghost. But the story of Porgy would not have existed without Dorothy. Dorothy really encouraged her husband to write the novel, even telling him to quit his full-time job and sell their house in Charleston so he could devote his time to finishing it. But once the novel was finished and became a critical success, it was Dorothy who really pushed for the novel to be turned into a drama and a play. Dorothy was a Harvard-trained playwright who had one of her plays produced on Broadway. And without telling her husband, she began rewriting Porgy as a play. And eventually, with his help, they finished it and sent it to producers and theatrical societies up in New York. The play did really well, and that became the direct basis for the opera, Porgy and Bess. But in looking at the materials in our collection, you can see Dorothy's handwritings on things, pages of the play script that she probably drafted, and introductions to the play that Dubose wrote, in which he credits Dorothy for the play's existence. Her name is also listed as the lead author in some of the play programs that we have, which I also found to be really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a huge, here in South Carolina, as you kind of mentioned, I think a lot of people, especially in the Lowcountry, are familiar with the name of Dubose Heyward and Porgy and Porgy and Bess, obviously. But hearing that Dorothy had such a large role in its creation is changes it a little bit and changes kind of how it's viewed, maybe even.
Oh, yeah. And Dorothy was the one who changed the story's ending for the play. So in the novel, the story ends with Bess running off to New York, abandoning Porgy and baby Clara to run off with sporting life. And Porgy is sort of left simply to mourn and be heartbroken over the fact that Bess has left him. But in the play, Porgy decides to go to New York to find Bess, giving the play a much more hopeful and empowering ending for Porgy.
So, how do you envision these digitized papers being used or viewed by people out in the world now that they are available to anyone with an internet connection?
So I think these papers have a lot of value, and not just for academic research. Scholars of literature, theater, music, and Southern history can certainly use these papers to study the development and significance of Porgy. But I think the papers also have the potential to resonate with students, teachers, performers, and members of the general public who are curious about the cultural history of South Carolina and the South in general. Seeing the handwritten drafts, the personal letters, and everyday documents can help humanize historical figures and can make the creative process feel much more immediate and real. So hopefully, these papers will spark curiosity and maybe lead to some new research and creative projects that will help people feel more connected to the cultural history of the Lowcountry.
And I think, too, it also just shows how much of a labor of love writing is.
Yeah.
And how much of a process, like, and especially like with getting other people involved too. Obviously Dubose didn't do this on his own. He certainly didn't turn it into a play or an opera on his own. It was a process that involved lots of people.
Oh yeah, it was definitely a team effort. And one of the things that I found really interesting in learning through this digitization project too was how much they were willing to rise and fall over it, like together.
Mm-hmm.
They specifically for the play, Dorothy started it. They finished the play together and sent it to New York to producers and theatrical societies and got some of them to agree to produce it.
Mm-hmm.
But they really wanted the cast to be all Black actors
Mm-hmm.
and actresses. They were willing for the play to not air at all or not become successful.
Mm-hmm.
That had to happen.
Yeah.
Or they didn't want to make it a play.
Which it did not get performed here in Charleston.
Yeah.
For a while because of that, for decades because of that.
Yeah, exactly. It has such an interesting history. And I just think it's this really cool cultural product of the Lowcountry and South Carolina. So I'm glad that it gets some recognition.
Well, so, of course, this is not the only thing that you have done in your time here at the South Carolina Historical Society. So tell us a little bit about what you're working on now and what people can expect to see next on Lowcountry Digital Library.
So right now in our country, we're celebrating a huge anniversary. This summer, we will be having the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence and a lot of American Revolution anniversaries coming up in the next few years. Also in South Carolina this year, we're celebrating the 250th anniversary of the Battle of Sullivan's Island. Carolina Day is a huge deal around here. But to help celebrate the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution, we've been doing a lot of digitization of our American Revolution records. The collection that I have been working extensively to digitize and am continuing to work on now is our collection of Henry Lawrence papers. Henry Lawrence was a very wealthy merchant, planter, and slave trader from Charleston, and he became a very prominent politician during the Revolution. But he's kind of become this overlooked figure, both in South Carolina and national history. So I've been working really hard to digitize his papers so people can know more about him, and hopefully there can be some more study of Henry Lawrence.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And we will look forward to seeing all of that on Lowcountry Digital Library soon. I know some of it, the Henry Lawrence papers are already up there, and the Heyward papers are up there now.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that part. Yeah. A good majority of the Henry Lawrence papers are done and are up on the Lowcountry Digital Library. But we're hoping to finish up his letter books. So those can also be up on the Lowcountry Digital Library in the near future.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And we can't wait to see all of that up and freely available. Thanks, Annette.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you back here next month with an episode we created in partnership with the Massachusetts Historical Society to celebrate the 250th. We talked with James Taylor, the former editor-in-chief of the Adams Family Papers at the Massachusetts Historical Society, about the relationship between South Carolina's Henry Lawrence and Massachusetts's John Adams. How did these two founding fathers compare? We'll see you back here on the second Monday in June to find out.